Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the spectacular youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. Another week down in the Big Ten, youngster, and it just keeps getting more and more exciting. But before we get into basketball, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's been a writing type of day for me this morning. Again, every Monday morning for those who typically listen to the show. I never have my stock job. I always do that Tuesday through Friday. But so it's been a writing morning for me. I was finally able to go outside for, here and there to walk the dogs primarily. And it's like 75 degrees. And I've been somewhat joking the last, month or two on this show, Troy, that, oh my God, it's in the 40s, this is Florida, what the heck. But seriously, it's 75. So, I can complain.
Hey, I'm not too far behind you. 56 here right now as I'm doing this show. I'm catching you. That's much better than 7.
Yeah. Yes,
That's
it is.
That's where it was last week when we did the show, 7. Now
right.
It's 56. So,
yeah.
Hey, I'm catching you. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it's marvelous. 75 degrees, a little cloudy. It's not, sun beating down on you hot. It's breezy, 75. It's very nice for January 22nd as we're recording the show. We always record it on a Monday. Part of that reason is because the AP Top 25 comes out on Monday. Another reason is because we only have so much time in our days, as Troy and I are a little busy outside of the show, and this is a time where we can record the show. So we do that. But first, Troy, I'll bounce it back to you. How are you?
Yeah, not a whole lot going on over here, just the typical things. But I did want to, before we start this show, you and I always keep track of analytically how we're doing, things to improve our show. And this last week's show is going to rank as one of our top 3 most listened to shows. So I want to give thanks to those that are returning listeners. Thank you so much for your support. Kevin and I, we tweeted out this week. We've been doing this show for 1 year. We're excited that we've made 1 year on The Grueling Truth. Does not seem like 1 year, youngster, but it has been a year. And to be able to record last week's show, which ironically was the 1 year anniversary, and to have it be one of our top 3 most listened to shows, spectacular. Just got to love it. So I'm sending out all my love to all the listeners. Thank you for all the repeat listens. And you know what? I want to take the show to the next level this year, youngster. Those of you that listen in, follow us on Twitter at TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. Really want to get some fan interaction going and maybe add a tweet section to our show. But for that to happen, we have to have fans interact with us. So find us on Twitter. Interact with us. Let us know what you think of the show. You can agree or disagree with us. People disagree with me all the time, youngster, and it's okay. You disagree with me sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. But yeah. I want to get the fans involved. So anybody listening in, get us on Twitter and let us know what you think of the show. It doesn't always have to be fluffy puffy. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Tell us. We're okay. We're big boys. We can handle it. If you want to debate with us, do it. Go right ahead. Kevin and I love a great debate. But with that said, Kevin, we got a great show today. Going to go over the AP, going to go over the Big Ten standings. Then we got some great points about Big Ten basketball to this point, and we got a great schedule of games this week. So take it over, youngster.
Yeah, we'll do. Also on Twitter, follow us at youngsteroldman. That's all one word. That's our show's handle. We always tweet out the link as soon as it goes live on thegruelingtruth.net, which you can find all of our shows as well. Follow us on Twitter at youngsteroldman. That's where we'll have our polls. That's where we've had fan interaction in the past with, going back and forth week after week with certain people. We just want more of it. We want it to be a prominent thing where we have weekly stuff where we can pick and choose. Hey, it's not just a fantasy football question this week dominating our back and forth or, one comment about Michigan basketball. We want it to be multiple people, multiple, stuff going on Twitter, going back and forth, both Troy and I. That's what, I think would help us is to have different topics, and that's what we're going to do on the show going forward, is it's all basically going to be basketball because that's what most people are going to be talking about in the Big Ten world now. from this point forward for a while. So if you've got anything on Big Ten basketball or other sports, again, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter and, debate us, agree with us, talk about why we're stupid, why we're smart. Doesn't really matter. Fan interaction always helps. And, like Troy said, if we can build in
I do
a fan
prefer
interaction.
the smart comment, Kevin. I do prefer that they would tell us we're smart. But,
yeah.
I guess I shouldn't be asking for the world on that one. But
no.
It would be nice if we get a listener or two that actually would say we're pretty smart. I'd like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you there. I will move on now. It is week 12 in the college basketball season, which for most people, myself included, I'm a big college basketball person, but to say it's week 12 in the college basketball season, it means absolutely nothing to me. And I love college basketball. If I had to pick one sport to cover for the rest of my life, it would probably be college basketball, but like saying it's week 12 doesn't really mean anything. So why I said that, I don't know, but as this poll that I'm looking at, it shows, college men's basketball rankings week 12. In any case, this comes out January 22nd. For those listening again, as we're recording the show, is January 22nd, which is a Monday. And Purdue was the number 3 team in the country a week ago at this point. And fast forward to this week, again, January 22nd, Purdue is still number 3 in the country. They actually received one of the number 1 overall votes, which we even mentioned a week ago, that this team, to call them the best team in the country right now, this second, if they were to play a game tonight against any other team, I don't know who necessarily I would take over them. I'm a Duke guy myself, but they're very young. They have shown to be susceptible. They may have more future NBA talent on their roster. I know they do. But as of right now, today, I'd probably pick Purdue to beat Duke. And before the year started, I thought Michigan State would play Duke in the national title game, and I'm not wavering on Michigan State at all, or Duke. But Purdue right now is playing, if not the best basketball in the country. Certainly top 3, 1 seed worthy. They're 19-2 overall. Only Villanova and Virginia are ahead of them. Both those teams are 18-1. So, take what you want from records. They certainly don't mean the world. But Purdue has won, let me see here, it's 15 straight games. So they're doing quite well. Michigan State moved up from 9-6. And as far as other teams in the Big Ten making the top 25, we've got Ohio State made absolutely a huge jump. They were 22 a week ago. They're up to 13. So they would be a 5.
Well-deserved. A well-deserved jump, youngster.
Yeah. They'd be a 4 seed if it went perfectly on that S curve, 1 to 4 being 1 seeds, 5 to 8 being 2 seeds, 9 to 12, I guess, would be 3 seeds, and then Ohio State would be that number 1 4 seed if it went perfectly. It doesn't because of geography and stuff like that, and this is also the AP's ranking. This is not the college basketball's selection committee's rankings. They're 2 different things. It's just like college football where, yeah, the AP poll matters, kind of, sort of, not really at all, until about week 7 or 8, and then the College Football Playoff Committee releases their first rankings 8-9 weeks into the season, and then it's like, okay, these actually matter. It's the same way in basketball. These AP rankings realistically mean nothing when it comes down to March Madness and the seedings that are given to these teams. But also, finally, 4th for the Big Ten. Michigan was 23 a week ago. They went 2-1 in Big Ten play this past week. I was expecting a little move up maybe, but they went down to 25. So they're barely in the top 25. There are no other teams receiving votes at the moment for the Big Ten, so it is just those 4, which make up the top 4 of the Big Ten standings. And number 5 is Nebraska. I'll get into them in a second, but it's just the top 4 in the Big Ten, but you've got 3 teams in the top 13. Purdue is still looking strong. Michigan State bouncing back from a week ago. They demolished Indiana this past week. That was their only game. But I guess your thoughts on these 4 teams, the top 25, Ohio State making that big move up, Troy?
Yeah, and it's one of those things. We talked about it last week, surprising Ohio State, and they just keep winning. But we talked last week's show, and if you want to find last week's show, just click. If you're listening to the show, you know where to find us. We talked about how Ohio State could probably end up maybe not at the top of the conference, but, man, they've got a pretty easy road, Kevin. And if you look at their schedule, we're going to talk about it later, most likely. the next 4 games Ohio State plays are all at home. And it's so much easier to play a Big Ten game at home. And Ohio State, well-deserving. This is a team that I wasn't sure would even be in the middle of the pack this year. That's what I said at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And, man, they're surprising the socks off me. And kudos to them. You know, a new coach, they had some talent, but we weren't sure how that was all going to gel, and it's gelled wonderfully. And good for Ohio State. Now, are they for real? I mean, you got to look at some of the competition, but they're going out there and they're playing good basketball. They're scoring points. They're playing good defense. They've bought into a new coaching staff. And maybe that's all it did take at Ohio State. But we need to see some tests. And I think that's why you're seeing them with record-wise and where they're at right around 13. Once they get into some bigger tests and they can win some of those bigger games, if they can win those, we'll see if Ohio State is for real. But you never apologize for the schedule. That's the way it lays out. Ohio State's taking care of business. I'm very surprised at Ohio State, but I'm giving them all of the kudos in the world. They're taking care of business. Michigan, to me, I think that's that team, Kevin, we talk about which of those middle-of-the-pack teams are going to separate themselves and go into that upper third of the conference. Michigan is doing that, and again, a little bit surprising to me. I wasn't sure what to expect from Michigan this year with the number of losses that they had. We know that they were playing great basketball going into the tournament last year, and it's carried over. They're off to a very good start in the Big Ten. They're starting to separate themselves from the middle of the pack. That's why you see them in the AP top 25. So Michigan right now is doing things to try and position themselves for another tournament run. So it's exciting. You talk about Week 12, Kevin, but if you look at the calendar, it's already January 22nd. We're like a month and a few weeks away from March Madness. That's it. We're like just over a month away. So I'm getting really excited. This, to me, is my favorite time of the college basketball season. Not just because football's done, but because you're looking right now at that final push, the final month. And we always hear about the committee and how do you do in your last 10? How do you do in your last 10? What is their record in their last 10? Well, we're getting pretty close to that last 10, youngster. We're getting really close. So to me, this is a very exciting time in Big Ten basketball. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and I have to bring this up. This is not Big Ten related, but people that follow this show know that Troy is from Wisconsin, and he's a big Wisconsin guy, and I have to just mention this. We don't have to talk about it for 1 second if you don't want to, Troy. It's not Big Ten related, but as of 40 minutes ago, it was reported that the Bucks were moving on from Jason Kidd as their coach. So I was just, I saw that on my little news feed that people were retweeting that, and it's like, oh my God, because I know Bucks fans have not been happy with Jason Kidd, not happy with that 8 seed in the East because that team is more talented than being an 8 seed. So just something I wanted to bring out there. If you want, we can talk about it for however long you want. If not, I will move into the Big Ten standings.
We're going to move into the Big Ten standings. I'm going to give one comment. When he was hired, I wasn't sure if he was the right guy for the job. If you remember, he came from Brooklyn. He had a bunch of talent. He had a lot of success. My big concern about Jason Kidd was, could he develop talent? And when you look at this roster, it's filled with talent, and I haven't seen it develop. So I saw the news feed like you did. I didn't bring it up. But as far as relieving somebody at this time, my biggest concern with Jason Kidd, and you can comment quickly and then we'll move on. My biggest concern, and I think we might have had you on the show, we were doing the Red Light Sports Ramble then when Jason Kidd was hired. My biggest concern with Kidd is, can he develop talent? I don't have any question about X's and O's. I don't have any questions about, a hard-nosed, blue-collar defensive team. But was he going to be able to develop young players? Because his time in Brooklyn was with veterans. And I wanted to see, could he do it with young kids? And apparently the answer is no. So I'm not overly upset about this. I'm not overly going to jump up and down and say, yeah, great, they got rid of Jason Kidd. I just need them to get a coach that can develop young talent, because that's what the Bucks are right now. And so, you know, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, well, ownership, the new ownership group that came in, they want him to develop these young kids too, and he hasn't been doing it. That's all I got on the Bucks. You can add your 2 cents worth, and then let's move into the Big Ten standings.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. I would be more happy than you would be, I think, because even X's and O's wise, just some of the things that he's done defensively, offensively, just don't make a whole lot of sense to me. But in general, you're right. You want to get the most out of your young guys, especially in Milwaukee, where you're not going to be bringing in high-level free agents left and right for the most part. So if you've got young guys like Giannis, who has developed a ton, I mean, he's, you know, arguably a top 5 player in the league already, and he's super young. But outside of him, I mean, yeah, Chris Middleton should be doing more. I don't know if Bledsoe is going to be developing more. This is obviously his first stint in Milwaukee, but guys like Jabari, he obviously has to stay healthy. Brogdon, the point guard, you know, how is he going to be developing? They've drafted a couple guys over the last couple of years. It's just you want to get the most out of that young talent. And I guess with the Big Ten in mind to shift, not going to start with Michigan State, but in general, you want to get this young talent gelling and better for when it matters, and that's the postseason. And the Bucks were the 8th seed in the East right now, so they were not feeling like they were growing. And if you're Michigan State and you're Tom Izzo and you feel like you're not growing with that young group, I'm not saying Tom Izzo should be fired, obviously, if they kept, you know, losing and it was a disastrous season. But point being, if you've got that young talent, you want to see it grow throughout the year. You're going to have your ups and downs with young guys, which Michigan State has had, but in the end, you want to be obviously healthy first and foremost, but playing your better basketball going into March Madness, playing your better basketball going into the NBA playoffs, if you're one of these younger teams wanting to prove something, proving that you can get it done against really good teams, whether that's college, whether that's the pros. But to get into the Big Ten standings, moving on from Bucks talk, Purdue still at number 1, 19-2 overall. Like I said, have won 15 straight games. 19-2 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten. Ohio State 17-4 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten. There's still that little gap. Michigan State still number 3, 17-3 overall, so a better record overall than Ohio State. But 5-2 in Big Ten play. So there's that gap again. 8-0 Purdue and Ohio State, 5-2 Michigan State. Michigan at number 4, 17-5, 6-3 in Big Ten play. Nebraska at number 5 in the Big Ten standings. They went 2-0 this past week. Going to talk a little more about them. 14-7 overall, so not as gaudy, but 5-3 in Big Ten play. Indiana at number 6, 11-8 overall, even worse as far as wins and losses go overall, but 4-3 in Big Ten play. Maryland at 15-6. So they actually have the 5th best overall record, but in conference they're only 500. They constantly, it seems like, go 1-1 each week. They're 4-4 in conference. Wisconsin at 10-10, 3-4 in conference, 8th in the Big Ten standings, even though we've kind of written them off for dead for a while now. They're still number 8 in the Big Ten standings, only 1 win back from Indiana, which is 6th. Not saying Wisconsin's going to make that run, but they're still right there in the thick of things. Penn State at 9, 13-8 overall, 3-5 in the Big Ten. Northwestern creeping up a little bit to 10, 12-9, 3-5 in Big Ten play though. Minnesota's dropping hard, 14-8, 11th in the Big Ten, 3-6 in the Big Ten. And then you've got the 3 at the bottom: Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois. Rutgers has 2 Big Ten wins. Iowa has 1. Illinois has none. The only team under 500 overall for the year is also Iowa at 10-11. Not that that matters. I mean, you have to get a certain number of Big Ten wins, regardless of your overall record, to basically be on the bubble and considered for the NCAA tournament. But I'll read through it again. Purdue at 1, then Ohio State, Michigan at 4, Nebraska at 5, Indiana 6, Maryland 7, Wisconsin 8, Penn State 9, Northwestern 10, and then you got Minnesota, Rutgers, Iowa, and Illinois at the bottom. I guess your overall thoughts, Troy. The one thing that pops out to me is Nebraska going 2-0 and being number 5 in the Big Ten standings, 8 games in.
Yeah, Nebraska was another one of those teams I didn't have in the tournament. They've put themselves into the middle of the pack, which I think to me is a success. Now, again, can they finish this off? There's still the meat of the season is right now, and that's why I said I love this time with Big Ten basketball. You're playing about 2 games a week. Every once in a while, you'll play 1 game during the week. We'll see if Nebraska can sustain this now through the next month. But this is their test. This is where they want to try to separate themselves into that 5th, even the 6th spot. And you, as soon as you started mentioning Penn State, Northwestern, Minnesota, started kind of shaking my head like, man, 3 teams that I thought were going to do a lot more damage in the Big Ten, and now they've already put themselves behind the 8 ball. I mean, all of them, I think, all of them have at least 6 losses in the Big Ten, Kevin? Is that what?
5. So they're 2 losses back in Nebraska. Yeah.
And so you're already at 5 losses. You're not going to run the table. I shouldn't count Purdue out the way they're playing. We talked at the beginning of the year, could Michigan State run the table? Never thought Purdue would be able to be where they're at. There's still 10 games to go, though, in the Big Ten. It's hard. It's very hard to run the table because you got home games, away games, you got good teams, bad teams. But any of the teams, and I look at it this way, Minnesota, I know they've got a couple injuries, but Minnesota has talent. And even when you're sitting at their, what are they, 11th, 12th?
Yeah.
They can still, they could beat a Nebraska. They could beat a Michigan. They have talent to do it. So when I look, I'm not saying that the Big Ten by any means is going to get 10 or 11 teams in the NCAA tournament. What I'm saying is you've got a group with Penn State, Northwestern, and Minnesota that I think are all quality teams that have just not played up to their potential. And so when you look at the standings and you look at the schedule, you can't say, oh, we got a gimme because we got Northwestern on the schedule today. No. Northwestern, if they would ever turn the light switch on, they actually, of that group of 3 that I mentioned, I think are the best of the 3 talent-wise just because Minnesota's battling some injury right now. If they were completely healthy, I might give the edge to Minnesota. But again, you can't just say, well, we've got Penn State on the schedule, so there's a win. No, you can't. Penn State has veteran leadership on that team and a team that's going to go out and play hard. They just haven't got the results. So I look at it and say, okay, these next 10 games, this is where that separation is going to happen. This is where you're going to see, who knows how many teams, Kevin, will make the Big Ten. My problem I have with this, you started going over the records, and you got Nebraska at 5th at 5-3. 5-3. And so I said this, I believe, 2 shows ago. The problem the Big Ten's going to have to get multiple teams in and a number of extra teams in is hard because 4 through 12 beat each other up. Yeah. 4 through 12 can win on any night. And when the 12th team in the Big Ten at 3 and 5 beats a 5-3 team, yeah, it's great for that 12 team, but it's not great for the 5 team, and it's not great when March rolls around. But that's what we're going to see here, and we need, if you want to make the tournament, you have to separate yourself right now at this time of the season. You can't be going 1-1 like Maryland because that's not going to get it done. You've got to go 2-0, maybe 1-1, then 2-0. You've got to separate yourself, and you got to be above 500 if you want to lock the NCAA tournament. In my mind, Kevin, if you get 10 wins in the Big Ten, if you go 10-8, and then of course you're probably going to have to win your first round game in the tournament. But if you go 10-8 in the Big Ten regular season, I think you're pretty close to being on that committee's radar to being in the national tournament. 9-9, that's iffy. 9-9, you might have to win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. So 10 to me is the magical number in the Big Ten. What about you?
I would say 11, only because Iowa went 10-8 a year ago in Big Ten play, didn't make the tournament, but they were 19-15 overall. And eye test wise, Michigan State was also 10-8 in Big Ten play, only 20-15 overall. They had 1 extra win, which probably came through the Big Ten tournament, but I don't remember exactly what Iowa did in the Big Ten tournament a year ago. But Michigan State had one more overall win. But eye test wise, I mean, just going 10-8, that Michigan was 10-8, Northwestern was 10-8, and those teams were clearly in the NCAA tournament, and Iowa was left out. So even at 10 wins, it's not guaranteed as of last year. But last year is different than this year, and this year will be different than next year. So there is no magical number. But I mean, if you go 11-7. You're obviously a good team. You're going to have wins on your resume. That's for sure. That count, that really matter in terms of quality wins, which the committee obviously looks at every single year. But yeah, like Nebraska, for example, if they go 5-5 the rest of the way in their last 10 Big Ten games, they only finished 19-12 overall. So that could be a case of Iowa where it's like this team went 10-8 in the Big Ten. We don't think the Big Ten outside of a few juggernauts is really all that much. So going 10-8, going 19-12 overall, Nebraska, hopefully you win a couple Big Ten games. If you beat a cupcake and then lose to a Michigan State, what does the committee do with that? Are they good enough? So even Nebraska at number 5 right now can go 5-5, not look terrible, but ultimately, it probably has to do some damage in the Big Ten tournament to even make the NCAA tournament. And that's the number 5 team in the Big Ten. I'm sure 5 teams will make it. But Maryland, for example, is one of those teams, 15-6 overall. If they get it rolling and pick up, wins 21, 22, and don't flop in the Big Ten tournament, I would expect them to be in, but they're down at 7 right now. There's not, like you said, Troy, there's not going to be a ton of teams making it from the Big Ten this year, but Penn State, Northwestern, Minnesota, if they got healthy / suspension problems, if they righted the ship that way, we'll bring them up a little bit later. But there's a number of teams that we're doubting. We're doubting Wisconsin. Penn State's not getting it done. Northwestern's not playing as well as they could. Minnesota's not up to standards in terms of just the players that are out on the court. And what they could be. Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois are way down there. There's a number of teams that it's already like, okay, you're probably done. And then even Nebraska, if they finish 500 the rest of the way, it's still like, okay, you got to win probably a couple games in the Big Ten tournament to get in. I mean, it's just you've got, I think, Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan, proving that they're good teams. They're in the top 25 for a reason. And then it's just kind of like, okay, the rest of you guys need to – someone's got to separate themselves. Because from Nebraska on, it's just like you're not playing that fantastic. That's why you're 14-7, or you're 4-4 in the Big Ten, or 3-4 in the Big Ten, 3-5. These teams have to separate themselves. We're getting into the meat of things, like you said. So yeah, a ton of stuff to prove going forward. But one point I wanted to mention too was the NFC and AFC conference championship games in the NFL, to make a random jump for a second, took place this past weekend. And Gronk, for example, was missing from the Patriots basically the last 3 quarters of the game, down by 10. Patriots needed 2 touchdowns against a really good Jacksonville defense, and they got him without Gronk, without this mismatch all over the field. And a guy like Caleb Swanigan a year ago, and we've talked about this before on the show, if you have that mismatch guy outside, inside, no matter what position he plays, it's great. But maybe your team's better without Swanigan because the other guys have to step up, and they are capable of stepping up at Purdue. They've shown that the last 15 games by winning every single one of them. Ohio State has gone 12-1 in the last 13. They haven't necessarily lost a key guy, but it's like all their guys are kind of chipping in, and Keita Bates-Diop is playing phenomenally, but he's not even the go-to guy that just, they run the offense through. They just have a number of veterans on that team led by a new coach who they, like you said, have bought in. And they're playing really well, 8-0 in the Big Ten. Melo Trimble, we've talked about that loss as well for Maryland. I just think that go-to guys in sports, so to say, in the NFL that aren't quarterbacks, and basketball especially, which is very team-driven, because you can have teams like the Heat with LeBron and Wade and Bosh and all these stars go against a team like the Spurs where Tim Duncan is 36 years old and Parker and Ginobili are old, And Kawhi's, in his second year of the league, whatever. And it's like, wow, the Spurs move the ball around. They play good team basketball. And the Heat just never had a chance. And LeBron had to leave Miami because he realized he had no chance there. He has all the stars on his team, but Spurs easily played better team basketball. They move the ball around. That happens when you don't have Melo Trimble stuck on the ball, Caleb Swanigan getting the ball every possession. Not that they don't deserve it, but Purdue proving this year they don't need Swanigan to succeed. Nothing against Swanigan at all because he was a monster last year and he deserved everything he got. But I think team basketball, especially collegiately, where you don't have one star just absolutely dominating, conferences and stuff like that, it's very rare to find a player like that averages 25 and 15 and just dominates everyone. That's almost never happens. Maybe one player a year kind of carries a team to a Sweet 16 or Elite 8, but eventually his teammates have to pick up the slack. It's nice to see team play like Ohio State, team play like Purdue, kind of trumping things. And Michigan State obviously has all this talent. They're still figuring it out. But, they beat Indiana by 28 points this past week. So they can play well when they need to. It seems like when they, put all their parts together. It's just nice seeing this team basketball kind of float to the top of the conference. Not that Maryland isn't playing team basketball. It's not that Indiana, Penn State, Northwestern, all these teams aren't. But it's nice to see Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State have a plethora of options and utilizing all those options and really separating themselves from the pack. Not that I have a question to you on that, Troy, but it's just something I wanted to draw a parallel to, that these mismatches that you throw them all over the field and they're these great assets to have. In the end, other guys, if they're capable, which is key, if they're capable of having to step up, they can, and it may prove to make your team even better.
Well, I brought it up in the preview show that I thought Purdue and Maryland will both be better teams this year because of what you just said. Now, on the flip side of that, you can look at Wisconsin. They lost their go-to guys, and they run a little different style system. They need guys. They don't need a superstar, but they need a go-to guy. They don't have a go-to guy right now. They're not a team that's going to go out and light up the scoreboard and knock down 80. If they can play a game in the 60s, that's what Wisconsin wants to do. They need to have that guy, that go-to guy that can score. That's what they're missing. And I bring that up for those that are listening in multiple times. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm a Badger fan. And for those that are listening the first time there, you just heard it. I hail from the state of Wisconsin. I now live in Pennsylvania. But Wisconsin basketball, Kevin, they need a go-to guy or two go-to guys to provide the scoring. And that's what they're lacking right now. They can't score. They've got the worst scoring offense in the Big Ten because they don't have that guy. Well, they kind of do in Ethan Happ. But when you can triple team that guy, nobody else is stepping up. And so your key was there that are capable. The Badgers on the court right now don't have anybody capable. Do they have, in my mind, players that could in the long run? Yes, but not right now. So that was a good point you brought up, youngster.
Yeah, thank you. And if you want to disagree with that point wholeheartedly, find me on Twitter at KIDCUNI. You can talk about how you agree with Troy and his preview thoughts on Purdue and Maryland, or you can tell us that we're both not thinking about something that we're missing. Troy's at TroyRobert967. Follow the show at YoungsterOldMan. And obviously all of our stuff is at thegruelingtruth.net. But yes, thank you. I will move on to what Purdue and Ohio State did, because I think that keeping tabs on what these two teams do weekly is kind of interesting. Purdue, and not that I have much to say about either of this, but Purdue this past week, just want to mention it, beat Wisconsin by 28, beat Iowa on the road by 23. They're rolling over teams. Ohio State went to Northwestern, played a tough game, had to win that one by 6. So that was kind of interesting to me. I thought that at Northwestern would probably be their biggest test before at Purdue, February 7th. And I mentioned this a week ago, and I said I expect Ohio State to be 20-5 overall. They're going to lose one game before playing Purdue, but like you said before, Troy, Their next 4 games leading up to Purdue are all at home. They're against Nebraska, against Penn State, against Indiana, against Illinois. There's no juggernauts in there. They're all capable teams, for sure. Illinois is very young and have a new head coach and a new system being implemented. But Ohio State is going to be favored in every single game leading up to Purdue. Could be 21-4, 12-0 in Big Ten. Both those teams could be undefeated in Big Ten play going into February, which is just crazy. But also for Ohio State, they beat Minnesota by 18 points. They're proving to be consistent and beating teams that they should beat. And even at Northwestern, they can go to a capable team who's not playing their best basketball and just say, yep, we're better. Which, again, before the season started, I absolutely thought that Northwestern was better than Ohio State. Proving right now that that's not the case whatsoever. Again, not that they have much of a question for you, Troy. I guess, is Ohio State proving to you that they belong in the top tier of the Big Ten, or like you said, do they need to be tested more?
Well, I had mentioned in the beginning of the show, I think you got to see some of these tests. Yep. But you can't argue, you can't apologize for winning. I'll throw it out there. I was wrong. I thought there was like 8 teams better than Ohio State at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And they're proving everyone wrong. And I'm not the only one that thought that. You know, nobody knew what to expect out of Ohio State. Nobody had Ohio State number 1 in the Big Ten. And if you did, I really want to see what you were thinking at that point, because, oh my. But again, they've got talent, and they're just playing well. Now, you mentioned some teams in there, Kevin. Indiana, Northwestern. These are teams that could possibly, as I said, knock off other teams. You know, just because Ohio State's undefeated, but playing a Penn State or playing in Indiana, it's not like they're going to be afraid of Ohio State.
Right.
When they step on the court, those teams are, like you said, capable. They're very capable of knocking off Ohio State. Ohio State has been up to the task every game. That's what impresses me. They're not all of a sudden mentally lapsing one game and losing to a Northwestern. They went in, they saw the blood that Northwestern has on their little cuts, and they just feasted. They just feasted on it like a shark.
I like that.
You know what? Good for them. But I still think they need to be tested. They've got to play the Purdue's. They've got to play the Michigan States. They've got to play the Michigans. Because to me, Michigan has been a team that has separated themselves into that next middle pocket of teams below Michigan State and Purdue. Ohio State record-wise is sitting atop the Big Ten, but I still don't have them above Michigan as the best team. I would, if I had to rank those teams that you're talking about, and again, I'll rank them as of January 22nd. I'm putting Purdue ahead of Michigan State right now. You'd be silly not to. They're playing such good basketball. So I would rank Purdue, then it would be Michigan State, then I would put Michigan there, then Ohio State.
Interesting.
That's where I would put them. Michigan, to me, could probably play with Michigan State right now. And again, it's nothing against Michigan State. Talent-wise, on paper, Michigan State should be killing everyone. They're still trying to figure it out. They'll figure it out. And when they do, that's probably going to change in my mind, and Michigan State may vault ahead of Purdue. Because talent-wise, when you put them on paper and put all the papers side by side, Michigan State will trump any talent in the Big Ten. It's just not going to the court right now. But it will. I do not ever doubt Tom Izzo. We mentioned it last week on the show about how deep he's going right now. I think you said, Kevin, he was going, 10 or 11 deep every game? He's not going 10 or 11 deep in February. He will be down to 8. I would almost guarantee it. I'm not a betting man. I play with Monopoly money. But if I had my Monopoly money, that's what I'd bet on. Tom Izzo will not be going 10 deep come February. It will be 8. He will be setting up his rotation to prepare for the Big Ten tournament and to prepare for the national tournament. So as far as Ohio State goes, I'm giving all the kudos in the world, but I still need to see some bigger tests.
Yeah. To my next point, Michigan State, their only game this past week, they, again, beat Indiana by 28 points. So are they figuring it out? I don't know, but they obviously did against Indiana. They felt that. I guess your thoughts on that game, does that surprise you at all, seeing Michigan State beat Indiana by basically 30? Do you think this is just the start, the beginning of Michigan State just rolling everyone, or do you think it's one of those games where it's like, yep, our talent showed, but we still need to go through the rest of the Big Ten schedule before we really figure out, what we are going into the conference tournament and then March Madness?
No, I think we talked about it. That last 10 is so very important. Tom Izzo knows that. Tom Izzo knows February. The month of February is so important to the selection committee. So important. And so Tom is, like I said, I'm not saying they figured it out with one win, because Indiana's a good team, but to win by 28, that's huge. So maybe they're figuring a little bit out. I don't think they're completely there right now, but that was a huge win. We'll see what they do this week. And if they can now start putting that dominant performance, then we'll know they're back, or we'll know they're there. I don't think they were ever there, so there's no place to get back to. But I think Michigan State, that's a huge quality win. That's a confidence builder, because Indiana, you look where they're at, middle of the pack team. You don't expect a middle of the pack team to lose by 28. But you can flip the table and say, look what Purdue did to Wisconsin. They crushed them by 28 also. And Purdue, I put a tweet out this weekend, Purdue in their last couple of games, just look at their margin of victory. Nobody's even coming close to that level. Purdue is just ultimately dominating, and Michigan State will get there. So was Indiana the start of it? Maybe. It very well could be. We'll see what they do this week, youngster.
Yeah. Next thing I wanted to bring up, and I'm with you wholeheartedly on that, but Nebraska. Nebraska went 2-0 this past week, and again, Nebraska is 5th in the Big Ten, only 14-7 overall, but again, 2-0 this past week, 5-3 in Big Ten play, 1 win away from being 6-3, just like Michigan. One game, not even one game, they're half a game behind Michigan State for 3. Nebraska this past week, what did they do? Nebraska beat Illinois by 1 point, which obviously a little questionable, but then 3 days later came back and beat Michigan by 20. 72-52. Nebraska just took it to Michigan. And Michigan, basically up until this point of the show, I had been saying Michigan is, okay, they're a top 25 team. This result is probably why Michigan moved back a little bit in the top 25 poll from 23 to 25. Losing to Nebraska by 20 is not something you would expect. But again, Nebraska playing good team basketball. Their starting 5, 8 points, 10 points, 13 points, 14 points, 19 points. Granted, they only had 8 guys score. A couple guys had 1, 2. But in general, their starting 5 got it done, and they basically went 7 deep, and an 8th guy played 7 minutes. But Nebraska, their starting 5 that they have, proving to be effective, shot 55% from the floor against Michigan. This was the one game I wanted to really, kind of hunker in on a little bit, not to diagnose it too much, but Nebraska beating Michigan by 20 opened my eyes when I saw it. Getting out-rebounded by Michigan, and not that Michigan's this, huge monster team, but just the starting 5 of Nebraska playing really well. You had a former top 25 recruit from Georgetown, Isaac Copeland. He's a starter. He played the most minutes in the game for Nebraska. They're proving that they have guys. Watson, the guard, is playing really well. He's coming back from a year ago. I think Nebraska is probably better than what people think. And as a whole, they've lost to Purdue. They've lost to Kansas. They've lost to Creighton. They've lost to Michigan State this year. Those are their losses since the month of November. And then you add an overtime loss at Penn State by 2 points, which obviously could have gone either way, but they've had close ones like Wisconsin by 4. Like I said, Illinois by 1. I just think this team is better than what people give them credit for. But unfortunately, their overall record, 14-7, they're going to have to do some things, I think, probably going into the Big Ten tournament to prove that they are NCAA tournament worthy. But like this coming week, they play at Ohio State tonight as we're recording the show on Monday. That would obviously be a monster win. They also play Rutgers and Iowa, which, again, if you're the fifth best team in the Big Ten, you should beat Rutgers and Iowa, which are at the bottom. So to me, they probably go 2-1, but it'll be very interesting to see. It's one of the more interesting games to me this week ahead for the Big Ten is Nebraska at Ohio State. If Ohio State crushes them, it kind of confirms that I don't really know how good Nebraska is. But at the same time, they've proven that they can beat teams like Michigan by 20. So just food for thought. Again, I don't really have a question for you there, Troy. But where are you, I guess, my question that I just manufactured, where are you on Nebraska? Do you need to see more? I think this game at Ohio State could be pretty telling.
I need to see a whole lot more. And here's why. If you look at the record, the record 14-7, 5-3. But more importantly, look at the scoring offense and the scoring defense. I think it's, when I look, 67.64 and 66.3 against. So you got a lot of close games. Now, they're edging out some of these close games, but they're edging out close games against the Penn State, against the Wisconsin. So we'll see how they do against Ohio State. So it's not so much when I look at it, okay, so Nebraska's ranked fifth in the Big Ten. I don't think they're the fifth best team. Because when you look at scoring, to me, they had that outburst against Michigan. I think they scored 72 against Michigan, played really good defense, and Nebraska does. But Nebraska can be, and it almost reminds me of a Wisconsin team before they had the dominant teams, a Wisconsin team that you kind of lived and died with. Are they going to score? And that's where I'm at right now as a Wisconsin fan. Can they score?
Yeah.
So what if Nebraska goes cold? They're done. You go up against an Ohio State team that can drop 80 on a dime against a good defensive squad. Well, Nebraska's not keeping up with that. Nebraska's not keeping up with a Michigan State. So if they're having an off night and they're not playing great defense and another team is going to drop 70, more than likely Nebraska's probably going to drop that game. So you mentioned the week they have ahead. Part of me saying that Iowa, one of those teams, Iowa or Rutgers, may beat Nebraska.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, we mentioned Ohio State as a big test. Going to Wisconsin, in my mind, is a big test, even though I'm way down on Wisconsin right now, just being real about the team that I cheer for. But Wisconsin plays really tough at home. That's a tough win. So to go on the road, to go to the Kohl Center and to beat the Badgers, that's going to be a tough game. That's no gimme for Nebraska. And when you look at the two squads, Nebraska and Wisconsin, I would give the edge to Nebraska scoring-wise, but they're two similar squads that are going to play good, hard-nosed defense, and they're going to keep the game low scoring. I'm not saying that works into Wisconsin's favor, but both of those teams are almost mirror images of each other right now. Now, again, I do this show, and you know, Kevin, I do it on the way home. I cannot look at the stats while I'm conversing. Do you have the Big Ten standings up? I want to see points per game for Nebraska scoring offense and Wisconsin scoring offense. I think Nebraska's only scoring like 3 points more than Wisconsin, and defensively, I think they're giving up more than Wisconsin.
In Big Ten play, Nebraska is scoring 67, giving up 66. Like you said, it's very even. Wisconsin's only averaging 62 offensively, and that's second worst in the Big Ten.
I
Giving
thought
up
it was
66
worse.
as well.
I actually thought it was the worst because they're not good at scoring. They have a hard time doing that.
But yeah, defensively, they're both giving up basically 66 points a game.
So they're mirror images of each other is what I'm saying, and now they have to go on the road. That's a huge test. If they want to separate themselves and say that they're a tournament team, they need to go to Madison, and they don't necessarily have to dominate, but they need to get a big road win there because these teams are, when you look at statistics, they're close. Now, talent-wise, I'm pointing the arrow to Nebraska. But sometimes, on any given night, maybe Wisconsin's jumpers go down. Maybe the three ball's going down. Maybe they don't. Maybe they find a way to get Hap going. And if that happens, it could be a long night for Nebraska. So, no, I'm not sold on Nebraska. I have a lot more to see. And not even this week. If they go 2-1, lose to Ohio State, but beat Iowa and Rutgers, oh well. You should beat Iowa and Rutgers if you're a tournament team. If you're the fifth best team in the conference, like you said, you should beat Iowa or Rutgers. I think Iowa or Rutgers, one of those two beats them, Kevin, because I'm not sold on Nebraska, and part of the reason is just what I asked you to look up, scoring defense and then scoring offense. Nebraska doesn't score a lot. They play good defense, though. That's all I got.
Yeah. And also, Nebraska beat Wisconsin January 9th, a couple weeks ago, 63-59. Low-scoring game. But, they after this week, they play Ohio State, Rutgers, Iowa. Then they play at Wisconsin January 29th, so literally a week from today. So will be interesting to see what happens with Nebraska going forward, especially these 3 games jam-packed before next week's show. To move on from Nebraska, something I want to bring up, kind of a bigger point, is we already count out Wisconsin making the NCAA tournament. But like teams, Penn State, Northwestern, they're 3-5 in the Big Ten right now. And overall, I guess I'll look it up. Penn State and Northwestern, 13-8, 12-9 overall. Can they get to 10-8 in the Big Ten? Can they go 7-3 the rest of the way? 7-3 for Penn State would get them to 20-11. Northwestern 19-12. That's going 7-3 in the last 10, and then probably having to win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament. Or we already, I guess, Troy, we already know what our thoughts are on Wisconsin. They're out, but being 10-10, 3-4 in the Big Ten. But Penn State, Northwestern, they should be probably tournament teams in both of our eyes. Have not been playing that way to this point. Have to go 7-3 at least to get to just 10-8 in the Big Ten. They can have that magical run to the Big Ten, championship game, and be 20-10, 21-11 overall, and make you say, okay, yes, this team has played their way into the NCAA tournament based on this past weekend. But as a whole, unless that happens, these teams have to get going now, because if they don't, if they split, go 1-1, 1-2, even 2-1, then it's like, okay, then over the last 8, you have to go, 7-1, 6-2? I don't expect that from either of those teams. So I think starting now, they have to prove that they belong in the NCAA tournament. If not, you can see Wisconsin being out, Penn State being out, Northwestern being out, Minnesota, Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois. That only leaves 7 teams left. And that includes Indiana, who's shaky, Maryland, who's even been 500, Nebraska, who we don't trust. So I guess to me, it's prove-it time for Penn State and Northwestern, especially Minnesota at 3-6. But I think their season's just about over as well because of the injury, because of the suspension. But yeah, Penn State, Northwestern. Again, I don't.
I'll interact right there, Kevin, with Minnesota. So you're talking about Minnesota, Northwestern. Tomorrow night's game, Northwestern at Minnesota. Whoever loses that game is done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say now. Whoever loses that game tomorrow night really has the slimmest of chance to make the NCAA tournament unless they win the conference tournament, because that will add another loss, and at that point you just mentioned it. 7-3, Kevin. 7-3 for these teams just to get to 10-8. Like you said, that wouldn't even give Northwestern 20 wins. They would have to advance pretty much to the Big Ten tournament championship game. The tournament selection committee will look at the last 10 and say, okay, you were 7-3. But if you're only 19-10, we saw it last year, Iowa didn't make it. And you can put your laurels, well, we went 7-3. I don't think Northwestern can go 7-3. They've got Michigan State in there. The only good thing is I don't believe they have Purdue. I don't think they have Purdue on the schedule the last 10. But they've got Maryland, I think, twice. They've got not a tough schedule, but they've got a schedule to me that doesn't bode well to go 7-3. I just wanted to interact there because I think tomorrow night's game between Northwestern and Minnesota, one of those two teams can keep their season alive, and one of those two teams can pretty much open the suitcase, start putting their goodbye clothes in it.
Yeah, and it seems kind of ridiculous to say it in January, but these two teams who are talented enough to beat most teams in the country, probably fighting for their lives Tuesday night. That's one of the games I wanted to highlight before ending the show. Was on Tuesday. You just mentioned it. But, yeah, it's go time. And for Northwestern schedule, they play Michigan twice. They play Maryland twice. They play Michigan State. That's 5 tough games right there. You add at Wisconsin. You add at Iowa even to end the season. That's, one of Iowa's – well, that is Iowa's final home game of the year. And a chance to, give another loss to Northwestern. I don't think that's going to be a give-me game because Iowa can score. And Northwestern's had trouble scoring at times. So this schedule is not easy. So I don't expect 7-3 the rest of the way. They're in real danger of making the NCAA tournament. We can say that in January. I think comfortably that they're in danger of making the NCAA tournament. It's just food for thought because I don't think many people think, hey, Tuesday night's game against Minnesota is pretty huge for Northwestern, huh? You would, kind of scoff at that. But seriously, it is. Because if they lose and go 12-10, 3-6 in the Big Ten, what, you're going 7-2 the rest of the way? Twice against Michigan, twice against Maryland, at Wisconsin, against Michigan State? No, you're not. So, yeah, it comes down to making a huge run in the Big Ten tournament, which at that point I don't think they do, against Purdue and Michigan State and how well Ohio State's playing. I don't see it. I think Northwestern's in real danger. I think Penn State's in real danger. I think that a lot of teams in the Big Ten are in danger. It's really go time now to really start your push for finishing the year strong and making your case as a 20-10 team, 21-11, make it to the second round, third round of the Big Ten tournament. Do we belong? It really starts now for picking it up with these teams because I doubt Penn State, Northwestern, Minnesota are finishing 8-0, 7-1 going to the Big Ten final. I don't think that's happening. So it really starts today, tonight, for these teams. But I guess my last point before talking about next week's games, before sending our listeners off, Minnesota at 3-6. I guess, are you already counting out Minnesota, Troy at 3-6 in the Big Ten? Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois, I'm sure you're already counting out. But Minnesota at 3-6 in the Big Ten have to go 7-2 the rest of the way. Again, an injury to Coffey. Lynch is suspended. This team, 14-8 overall, but 3-6 in the Big Ten. 11.
Disarray.
Yeah. Do you count them out?
Yeah. I've had them out for about a week. Again, this is a team. If the suspension is lifted, is Coffey done for the year? I thought I had read somewhere that he could probably return maybe at the end of February or somewhere in February, or was I misreading?
As of a couple days ago, and I didn't know this. Actually, top story, Atlanta10.com. Check out Atlanta 10 for those who don't know Atlanta 10. I obviously haven't been keeping up with the site that I write for. But Amir Coffey is active and supposedly expected to play against Ohio State. That is, let me see.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did not know this.
Well, my information came from last week, so that's good. I mean, that's good news, but to me, it's a little too late. They've already put themselves behind 2 8 balls. You just mentioned it. They have to win 7 Big Ten games. That is a tall feat. Going on the road in the Big Ten is tough. I don't care. Even if you're going to Rutgers, Rutgers is not just going to say, oh, yeah, here you go. Here's a win. You got to go there and play. And so Minnesota, to me, that team is in disarray right now with everything going on there. If Coffey wouldn't have got injured, would they be where they're at? I think they might have eked out another win in the Big Ten somewhere for 4 wins. But still, they're way below the expectations. You were really high on Minnesota at the beginning of the year, Kevin.
Yep.
I wasn't as high as you. I thought they were going to be that team that would be in the middle of the pack, but could have been one of those teams to separate like a Michigan. Because I thought they'd be a really good team. They're not a really good team. They're really not.
No, they've gone 1-5. They've gone 1-5 in the last 6. And the point I wanted to make, Coffey was back for Ohio State. That took place Saturday, and they lost by 18 points. So it wasn't close.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I've already counted them out. And I brought it up earlier in the show about how these teams, when you're looking at 5 through 12, will just beat up on each other. It's like a sparring match. They're just going to spar with each other. And what happens is when you spar, you get a jab here, you take a jab. You get a jab there, you take a jab. What happens? You end up 9-9 in the Big Ten. And if you end up 9-9 in the Big Ten, you're in trouble. You're in huge trouble to get to the NCAA tournament. Like you said, 10 could get you in. 11, it would be tough to keep an 11-7 Big Ten team out of the tournament. Yeah. No matter if the people think the conference is down or not. 11-7 in any conference that's a power conference pretty much should get you in the national tournament. But for Minnesota to get to 11 wins, Kevin, would they have to go 8-1? Is that what they'd have to do?
Yeah, 8-1.
Yeah, not happening.
No,
not happening. So yeah, I've counted them out. And I've pretty much counted out half of the conference already.
Oh, I know.
And it's frustrating to me as a Big Ten fan because I want to see as many teams in there as I can. But when you look at the level of play, it's frustrating that nobody wants to separate themselves. We talked about it, and for those listening in, if you go back a few it's more than a few now, the Big Ten basketball preview show, we talked about it. Kevin, you broke the conference down into like little groups, and I was agreeing with you about your middle group. Who's going to separate and make another group on top of that to be at the top of that middle group? Unfortunately, for Big Ten fans like you and I, only Michigan and Ohio State have done that.
Yep.
And I thought there'd be like 4 teams that would make up, okay, you got Michigan State, Purdue. That you and I were in agreement there. Those are the best 2 teams in the Big Ten. Then you had like 7 or 8 other teams that you could group together. But only 2 have done anything. So what's going on with the other 5? I've counted 3 of them out already. Penn State, Northwestern, and Minnesota. Those were 3 teams that I thought really could do some damage. And they've done nothing but poo the bed. And so, I'm a little frustrated because now what will happen is they've done so poorly here in the first half of the conference season that if they turn it on, now they're just going to jab and spar with everybody else. And so as a Big Ten fan, you're going to limit the number of teams that make the national tournament. You mentioned 5, Kevin. Right now, 6 to me would be the top. 6 would be tops right now. And just 3 weeks ago, I was saying it could go as high as 9. Not anymore. I'm at 6 right now. So that goes to show you what 2 or 3 weeks of basketball can do. I'm down to 6. That's sliding Nebraska in, but that's as of January 22nd. So give me another week, and Nebraska might be out. It might only be 5 that I think will make the tournament. So I think that was my long-winded answer to have I counted these teams out, and I've said yes to pretty much half the conference.
I know, and that was my theme for this show. That's how I figured this show would go. It's like, hey, look, Penn State's in real danger. We already count Wisconsin out. 3-4 in the Big Ten, 10-10 overall. They can't score. So throw Wisconsin out, Penn State's in real danger, Northwestern's in real danger, Minnesota's in real danger, Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois certainly aren't making this miraculous comeback. That's half the conference. That's 7 teams. That's not including Nebraska. That's not including Indiana, who is wishy-washy. That's not including Maryland, who's been 500 in the Big Ten. So it's really, it's scary as a Big Ten fan. If you're looking to get a ton of Big Ten teams in and you're thinking this year was better than last year, I think at the top it's better than it was a year ago, this conference. Purdue, Michigan State, the way Ohio State's playing, but Purdue, Michigan State, you could see them honestly winning the title this year, which is, I didn't expect that from Purdue, but that's the way they're playing. A year ago, you didn't expect any Big Ten team, even going into the NCAA tournament, to potentially win the whole thing. We knew there were some dangerous teams like Minnesota and Michigan, obviously Purdue and Wisconsin. They were dangerous a year ago. We didn't think they were going to potentially win the whole thing. This year at the top, there are a couple teams who potentially could, and Ohio State can do a lot of damage, it seems like. Michigan loses by 20 to Nebraska. How for real are they? So the middle group has kind of disappointed to me. Even Michigan at number 4 just lost to Nebraska by 20. So you can't trust the middle of this conference. Obviously, the bottom of any conference you can't trust. But, yeah, that's the theme to me. That's the story, I think, right now, midway through the Big Ten season, is this middle group of the Big Ten has really disappointed and really have to get their act together in order to make the NCAA tournament, and I just don't expect it from Wisconsin.
Kevin, I don't even think they can make it getting their act together. They've put themselves so far behind at 3 and 5. Yeah. You mentioned it before. It's pretty odd that you're saying here at the end of January that we're counting teams out. But you got to look at the whole landscape now of NCAA basketball when you're looking at a tournament. And when you look at the Big Ten, 3 and 5, we just went over it. We gave everyone listening in the facts. These teams have to go 7-2 just to get to 10 wins, which is no guarantee because they won't be at the magical 20 number. That means they'd have to win in the Big Ten tournament. You're almost asking for the impossible, Kevin. Even if they get their act together, they're still a bubble team. When before the season started, we really thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in talking for you, we really thought, though, that there was probably 7 or 8 solid teams that could make the NCAA tournament. And right now, I'm seeing 4 solid teams that'll make the tournament with a couple, like you said, wishy-washy teams there. If they get their act together, I think there's only 3 teams, Kevin, that can get their act together to solidify spots. Nebraska, Indiana, Maryland. Everybody else in my book, they're done. They're out. There's no way. They've got to almost play perfect basketball from here on out. And the problem is, of those 7, they've got to play each other. And again, they're going to jab and they're going to spar and they're going to give the other team a loss. So to me, it's nearly impossible for those 7 that we've talked about to make the NCAA tournament. Maybe one of them could sneak out of that group, but to me, it's nearly impossible. That's all I got.
Bleak future ahead. Great way to end the show. Next week, or this coming week, for Big Ten action, games I wanted to just mention. If you're listening to the show, whenever you do, these are games to look for. Most interesting games, Nebraska at Ohio State Monday night. I doubt this podcast is going to be up in time for that, but that's a final score to look at. Going to be interesting to me. Northwestern and Minnesota, Troy already mentioned on Tuesday. That's going to be interesting because the loser of that, honestly, probably done. Michigan at Purdue Thursday. That's huge. If Michigan were to actually do something in that game, that'd be enormous. But at Purdue, I would expect Purdue to handle Michigan. Michigan State at Maryland on Sunday. Purdue at Indiana on Sunday. Couple interesting games on Sunday. At Indiana is never an easy place to win, so can Purdue beat both Michigan and Indiana this week? If they do, and do so convincingly, I don't know how you think they're not a legitimate title contender at this point, and especially after this week, because they've got a couple interesting games against Michigan and Indiana. So on Sunday, if you're not doing anything, Michigan State at Maryland could be interesting, and Purdue at Indiana. At Indiana is never an easy win. Games to look for this week in the Big Ten.
And that Purdue-Indiana, that's a rivalry game. I mean, that's a huge rivalry game, so Indiana's going to be pumped up for that. That's home for Indiana. Like you said, it's never easy. Doesn't matter what team you are going on the road. And I mentioned it earlier in the show. Anywhere in the Big Ten is hard to play. Rutgers isn't folding over. Iowa's tough at home. Even Northwestern. These teams are tough at home. I remember some good Wisconsin teams going to Northwestern and struggling when Northwestern sucked. Literally sucked. They'd go to Northwestern and they would struggle. And part of that is because of traveling in the Big Ten. So any time that I'm seeing a game on the road, you're not going to sit there and go, oh, my, Purdue should be afraid of Indiana. What I'm saying is Indiana's just going to play maybe a little bit better than normal. And so Purdue has to counter that. So maybe Purdue doesn't win that game by 20. Maybe they win by 8. But it could be a struggle for a while. We've talked about it, Kevin. Sometimes in these games that are rivalry games, you can throw the records out. And now you're playing on the road, so you can throw the records out again because the home crowd's going to be there. The players are excited to play at home. You were an athlete. I was an athlete. I loved playing at home. I always wanted to make my home fans proud. So, I feel like I played with a little more adrenaline to start a game, even against more highly skilled teams and that may have overmatched us, but we'd come out guns blazing just because you have that extra adrenaline. Sometimes it can backfire for you, but I would say the majority of time, that extra adrenaline and that extra desire to play well at home, it helps. And it gives teams that advantage. And so if Purdue comes out cold and all of a sudden finds themselves in a 12-point deficit, they're good enough to overcome that. But now they've got to climb a mountain that they haven't done before. And that's what's going to be the real test to me, Kevin, with this Purdue team. Everything's been so darn easy up to this point. What happens when they find a game with some adversity? When they're down by double digits? If they ever go down by double digits. I mean, the way they're playing, they'll never be down by double digits. But what happens in those games, and I think you know what I'm talking about, everything's been so easy for Purdue. My test for them, I want to see them in a game where there's some adversity, where they're turning the ball over, they're in a dogfight. I want to see that game because that will tell me a lot about Purdue and how good they really are. Because right now everything's been so darn easy. And they're not winning the rest of their games by 20 points. So what do you think about that? And then we'll wrap the show up because I think it's a very valid point to end the show. Purdue, in my mind right now, Kevin, I know they're not the number one team in the country, but it would be hard for me to bet against them if I had to fill a bracket out right now. I think I'd have them cruising all the way to win the national title, the way they're playing. But what are your thoughts here? What do you need to see from Purdue as you move forward to basically validify that they're I'll say it this way, validify that they're the best team in the country because they're playing like it right now?
Yeah, since December 4th, they've been in one game in single digits, and that was January 9th at Michigan. They won by 1 point, so they won a close one there. But again, the 10 games in total before and after have all been double-digit wins. They're cruising, like you said, for the most part. So to me, I mean, it's this week that we're going to see a lot. Michigan and Indiana, both real games. Next week is light for the most part. They get Maryland at home. Maryland's, a capable team, but Purdue's at home in that one. And they play Rutgers next Saturday. But then the week after that, also a huge week. They play Ohio State at home, and then they travel to Michigan State. That's obviously going to be a monster matchup, February 10th. But yeah, this week, and not necessarily next week, but the week after that, these next 6 games really are going to be huge. Even after Michigan State, they play at Wisconsin. Then they get Penn State at home, who's capable. So the meat of the schedule for Purdue is up ahead. Like you said, though, once this team is truly tested on a nightly basis, I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, when they play teams like at Indiana, is going to be hostile. Ohio State is talented. Michigan State, obviously talented. Those are the games we're going to really find out a lot about Purdue, because if they're cruising by teams like that, by 20 points and double digits, to fill out a bracket right now, I would seriously take Purdue to win the whole thing. I know what Villanova's about. I know what Virginia's about. Those are the two teams ahead of them, according to the AP. There are obviously teams behind them who are capable as well. But right now, Purdue's playing like the best team in the country. So this next few week stretch is going to be interesting to me. And the rest of the Big Ten, you've got to basically go out and prove it over this, starting now, to really prove that you belong in the NCAA tournament.
That's a great way to end the show, youngster. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And again, if you've listened this far in, we appreciate everybody that listens to our show. Thank you for making the last year very enjoyable for the youngster and myself. And then, Kevin, we've been doing this a long time. I've been, doing this a little bit longer than you. Pulled you in, you fell in love with it. And it still amazes me when we can get a show that is a popular show and it ranks up there like last week's in the top 3. So I guess I get all mushy-mashy, outside I get all like a little teddy bear and all happy that we can do those things, though, because that means that we provided some good content. So I hate to get all gushy to the listeners, because I am sometimes a grumpy old man. But I do appreciate it, and I know you do, Kevin, all the fans that listen in. We appreciate all of the support that you've given us. Keep listening. Find us on Twitter at TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. And then, like Kevin said, our show handle, at Youngster Old Man, all one word. Not only do we do a Big Ten show, but we do a couple other radio shows, and we archive those on that Twitter page. So if you like NFL football, NBA basketball, hockey, we talk about it all on those shows. But for the youngster, I am the old man. Thanks for listening today. Have a great day, everyone.